Hello Year 8, and to start off today we've got a simple question: which is better, Android or Apple? Answers in the chat, but you have to have a reason. You can't just put an answer, you've got to tell me why. I'm going to pause the video now so you've got a chance to do that. Okay, we are ready to move on. Now that's settled, of course. So we are going to today look at why we need custom functions in programming. So first thing to do is figure out what is a custom function. So you can see in my flowchart that I showed you a couple of weeks ago, we've got a loop back to the start. So when they found out about a certain illness, it loops back to the start and asks them, do they want to find out about another illness? Or if they've typed in something I wasn't expecting, like something that wasn't on my list, it also loops back to the start. And this is where a custom function is going to come in. We're going to need that if we're going to loop back. So when we want to loop back, we can reuse a bit of code. Instead of having the code written out over and over and over again, it's really inefficient. We just tell the computer, this is something called a custom function. So this is something that I've programmed as a programmer that I'm telling you you can do whenever I call it. So when we call it, we want you to follow these instructions. Okay, so that's the word we use when we say we want to run this function, we want to run this code. We say we're going to call that code. So a custom function is a way of telling the computer, this is a bit of code that I might use over and over again. Okay, for our program, we actually want our custom function to be at the start and include the whole program. So we're going to look now at how we would do that. So the first thing we do in a custom function is we define it. We define the custom function. So here's the code that we were working with last week. And I want to tell it that all of this program right here is actually part of a custom function that I want to be able to loop back to the start whenever I want. So what we do is I'm going to move it all down the line by pressing enter, and I'm going to put def, which is short for define, but because programmers are lazy, we've shortened it to def. Then you give this custom function a name. It can be anything you like as long as it's not a reserved word. So I'm going to call mine digidocs because that's the name of my whole program, but you could call it loop if you wanted to. Then pair of empty brackets and then colon. That's saying everything else after this is part of my custom function. But now we've got to show it which bits we want to be part of the custom function. And the way we do that is we indent any parts we want to be involved. Now I want the whole program top to bottom to be included. So I'm going to go down each line and I'm going to press tab. So tab on the left hand side of your keyboard is going to move it in a certain number of spaces. So every line I'm going to do this. So all of it gets moved across one tab. And what this means is it will understand that all of this code is included in my custom function. Every last bit of it. Okay? Now, if I run this now, nothing would happen. Because when you define a custom function, you aren't calling it. So at the moment, the Python goes, let's have a look at this program. What have I got? Oh, I've got a custom function called digidocs. Let's read it. Yeah, okay, I understand that. And then it doesn't do it. You have to call it before it will do it. So to call it, you have to go over all the way back over to the left-hand side. So at the bottom of my code on the left-hand side, I'm going to call the function. Now, I do that just by writing its name. So digidocs and then bracket. Okay, you need those brackets, then they've got to be there. Now, because this is on the left-hand side, Python knows this isn't part of the function. This is a new instruction. So I'm going to be Python again for a minute. Okay, right, start the program. Right, they've got this custom function called digidocs. Read through it. Yeah, okay, that makes sense, but I'm not going to do it yet. Oh, right at the bottom here, I've got this instruction, digidocs, bracket. Oh yeah, that's the name of the custom function. And now I'm going to go back up to the top and I'm actually going to do the instructions in that algorithm. Okay, so that's really important. That's calling the function. So let's just test that works. So run module. Yep, I'm going to save. Okay, let's get this on screen for you so you can see it. Okay, there we go. Right, so you can see it looks like my program. Now if I type in flu, it should behave itself and do its thing. But then this here is the end of the program. The program hasn't gone back to the start. It hasn't said welcome to Digidocs again. So what I have to do is go back to my code and say, actually, where do I want you to go back to the start? Where do I want to call the function again? So let's look at that now. So if we follow what I did there, so I said flu, didn't I? So we said, right, it's run through the program, it's called Digidocs, it's printed, welcome to Digidocs, choose an illness from the list, and that I put in flu. So then it went to here, it said, yep, illness was flu, what they typed in was flu. So it printed all this information, and then it just ended the code. So at this point here, I want it to go back to the start and ask, choose an illness from the list. So I could say here, I just write Digidocs, bracket, bracket, so I'm just calling that function again. So if I type flu, it should print all this information and then go back to the start. Let's test it. Okay, make sure you guys can see it. There we go. So I'm going to type in flu. Right, and you can see I've got flu symptoms and the list of symptoms, and then it goes back to my start. Welcome to Digidocs, choose an illness from the list. Okay, now if I do cold, does work, prints out all the symptoms for cold, but then ends. I want it to go back to the start. So let's make sure that happens too. So after it's printed the information about cold, let's make sure it goes back to the start by calling the custom function. And we're going to want the same for headaches. And I'm going to want the same for else as well. Oh, I've made a mistake in the line above. Forgot my brackets. Okay, now whatever happens, it should loop back to the start. Let's try it. So let's pop it on screen. Awesome. So if I type in cold, it loops and we get back to the start. If we type in headaches, it does information about headaches and then it goes back to the start. If I type in something nonsense, if I type in something that isn't on my list, like a cut or cuts, it goes back to the start. Okay, so each time I run through my code, it then calls the function and goes back to the start. Now, it's a little confusing because there isn't a new line, so I'd quite like to put a new line in here to make it an even better bit of code. Let's just do that, shall we? So I'm going to look at my code. Where do I need this new line to be? So I could put it in right at the start here, couldn't I? So I could say /n, and that will give me a new line. Should we try and run that, see if that works? Just makes our code hopefully look a little bit tidier when it runs. So here we've got the list, as we know. I'm going to go for flu, but you can see I've got a bit of a space, so that just makes my code look a little bit more tidy, a bit more obvious that it's restarted. Okay. So that's a custom function. That's how we do it for our program. What I've got on this slide here is exactly what I just did. Okay, so if you need to pause the video and look at my code to try and help you, you can. Okay, that's there for you to do. So I'll give you a second to pause. Okay, now we're going to have a look at our success criteria. So if you haven't already done so, and you're finding the whole idea of custom functions a little bit overwhelming, or you're struggling to get them to work, bronze is just complete your medical program. Even if it doesn't loop back, that's fine. Okay, that's the bronze, that's what I want to do. Silver is to add those custom functions to loop your program when an unknown input is entered. So when they type in something that isn't on your list, can you make it go back to the start? I did show you that in the video earlier, so you can go back and look at that. Gold is to use a custom function to loop your program once they've looked at some information. So for example, once they've looked at cold, does it then loop them back to the start? And then the challenge is to research using the exit command to end your program. So that's when you'll have to go away and have a look at. Okay, best of luck guys. I'm going to leave you with the code on the screen, but there is a hand in point, so please do hand in whatever your program looks like at the end of this session. Best of luck.